Hello and welcome to the regular business meeting for the District of Squamish for Tuesday, November 21st. And as always, we're gathered to do our work today on the traditional and unceded territory of the Squamish Nation, and we're extremely privileged to do so. Can I have someone move adoption of the agenda? Moved by Councillor French, second by Councillor Stoner. All in favor? Motion carries. Please be advised that this council meeting is being live streamed, recorded, and will be available to the public to view on the District of Squamish website following the meeting. If you have any concerns, please notify the corporate officer present at the meeting, which is Miss Arthur's over here. So we have no delegations or proclamation requests this evening. So we're on to item 4, which would be consideration of unscheduled public attendance. If anyone has a matter that feels like it can't wait until the next regular business meeting, this would be your opportunity to present to council. Sir?
Hi there.
Please, so just I just want to be, I'm going to clarify some procedural, but we'll start with, we'll say your name and your neighborhood, or, and then where, and then this is an opportunity to relay to council why the matter that you would like to discuss can't wait until the next regular business meeting, which occurs in 2 weeks' time. Not so much arguing the actual point, and then we'll decide on that. And if you're successful, then we have a space for this under item 19 in the agenda a little later on, just so you know where you're at procedurally. But take it away. The floor is yours.
Sounds good. Thank you. My name is Aiden Nickel. I live and work here in Squamish. I'm here speaking on behalf of the vehicle residents of Squamish. We asked to speak to ask that the district make an emergency temporary amendment to the bylaws under the visitor and camping management plan. This cannot wait. The 2024 strategic plan is a lengthy and aspirational goal that holds no guarantees. And after the loss of the consultant's work, we need protection now. As you know, the bylaw perpetuates stigma, presents life's.
1 second. I think you're getting into proving or to the point that what we're looking for is the urgency of needed tonight versus in 2 weeks or at a future meeting.
I think that this is why it's urgent tonight.
Okay.
May I continue?
Back to you. Yep. Back to you. Just
as you know.
It's a matter we're still here. Sorry, gentleman's still making the point as to why it's important that it's heard tonight. So if you keep to the urgency,
yeah, absolutely.
That's
just got
just to be clear.
Yeah, a couple more sentences. Sorry.
Yep. Go ahead.
As you know, the bylaw perpetuates stigma, presents life safety issues for vehicle residents, and with the Squamish rental availability at 0.6% and a one-room Squamish rental averaging over $1,700, it is clear that the vehicle residents are not going away. We believe that doing a temporary bylaw amendment is the easiest path forward to legalize sleeping in a vehicle until long-term solutions for vehicle residents are in place. It is also cost efficient and can happen quickly. We have some ideas for amendments if you grant us the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your words. One thing is, just before I'll remind council that bylaws require readings to be adopted, and we don't have the power at this table to amend a bylaw in that fashion. Just as a procedural piece, but council, I guess we'd be looking for a motion to allow this unscheduled public attendance to be heard later in the meeting, if there's appetite for that. So look to council. Councillor Stoner.
I'll move that we deny the request for unscheduled public attendance at this time, and I'll speak to it if it's seconded.
Seconded by Councillor Hamilton. Go ahead, Councillor Stoner.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for being here this evening. I do appreciate that there is an item on the agenda that is relevant following from our discussions that we had last week at Committee of the Whole. this item is not new. It is not emergent, and it's not something that it's going to be able to be changed in 2 weeks' time. We can't do a temporary amendment to a bylaw. And I really do think that this discussion requires more nuance and more complexity from what we heard from the delegation of the Vehicle Resident Society last week, is that there are different options on the table. And so I think that an immediate knee-jerk reaction at this point is would not do anybody well. And so I think that we have a measured approach going forward in terms of referring this to our strategic plan update, which will be January or February, where we can have a more fulsome decision on what the impact will going to be and which direction we can take going from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to make comments on this? Councillor French?
Thanks, Mayor. And I'd like to thank Mr. Nicol for attending tonight and making the request. Generally, for unscheduled public attendance, I like to lean towards hearing from folks. In this case, I'm supporting the motion on the floor because we do have a process. And as we have heard, amending a bylaw is not something that can be done in one night.
Thank you. Other comments? Councillor Pettingill?
Yeah, I will support the motion. I think I feel that there is some council is concerned about the issues being raised, but I also think there are some complexities in terms of staffing and implementing some of these things that require some discussion. So I don't think we can have that discussion at the end of the meeting tonight in a constructive way. And as we've heard, we can't amend a bylaw tonight. Amending a bylaw is a several-week process because there has to be multiple readings and then an adoption and so on. But I also am hearing, and I don't have a way to respond just yet, frustration with understanding what the process is and how people can engage with the process and make sure that the voices here are heard and reflected in the decision we make. And so I think as a council and maybe individually speaking to some of the folks in the room, we need to make sure that that process is going to be clear. That's not just discussion sometime in January and February, that for the folks that are coming and concerned about this, they're clear on how to interact with and influence that process.
Thank you. Any other comments? I'll be supporting the motion. I really do appreciate when folks come and it's not easy to stand at the podium and ask for something from this group. And I think you've done a great job of articulating the urgency and the frustration that you're feeling. So even if this isn't successful this evening and it doesn't feel like it is, I think you've been successful in keeping this issue front of mind. The strategic plan review, which we'll do in Q1. Strategic plan is where we provide the broad directions to staff as far as what outcomes we're looking for, and that everything flows from that: budgets, work plans, and all of that. So this needs to be initiatives like this need to be weighed against everything else in the plan and capacity, and that's the best place to do that. And in between here and there, we'll be seeing an update on the visitor management work from our staff as well. So there will be some touch points going forward, and this is not in any way a deferral of work on this issue. And I understand that we're not moving as fast as some folks would like, but there is work underway, and we absolutely haven't forgot about you, and we do hear your voices. But this particular avenue this evening isn't the path forward at this point for me. And with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Any other consideration of unscheduled public attendance? Seeing none, I'll move forward. We have no public hearings tonight, no timed items. We're on to the consent agenda. Would anyone like to pull anything from consent agenda? Nope. Yes, Councillor Hamilton, go ahead.
I'd like to pull item 7C1, Staff updates for information, Brennan Park Energy Study.
Sure. Okay. And we'll deal with that in the spot that's labeled correspondence from. Seeing no others, you moving consent agenda? Councillor Stoner moves consent agenda, seconded by Councillor French. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Now we're on to item 8, and this goes to recommendations to Committee of the Whole from November 14th, 2023. So the first item there is vehicle residents of Squamish, that the discussion regarding vehicle residents of Squamish be referred to 2024 strategic plan review. Moved by Councillor French, second by Councillor Stoner. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. The second recommendation coming from that meeting was regarding water metering program, that staff defer the remaining 46 water meter installations described in the water metering program report from the Community Planning and Sustainability Division dated November 14th, 2023. Moved by Councillor Stoner, second by Councillor Hamilton. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. And now we're on to bylaws for first and second reading. We've got zoning bylaw number 2200, 2011, amendment bylaw number 3004, 2023. And we have staff to present to it. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Mayor, I am declaring conflict of interest in this matter. One of the people connected to the ownership of this property made a financial contribution to my election campaign. And to avoid the perception of a conflict of interest, I'll remove myself from this particular discussion.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor French. You'll be in the back conference room, and we'll come find you. Okay, I will turn the floor over to staff to introduce themselves and the topic.
Thank you, Mayor Herford. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Brian Daly, planner with Community Planning. I'm here tonight to present a rezoning application at 40279 Government Road for consideration of first and second reading and to schedule a public hearing. The subject property is a vacant lot at 40279 Government Road. It was formerly developed with a single unit dwelling that was destroyed by fire. The property is unique in that it is a hooked parcel with approximately a 1.5 hectare lot on the west side of the CN rail line and a 0.58 hectare parcel fronting Government Road on the east side. The parcel on the west side of the rail line is zoned RL2 and is in the Agricultural Land Reserve. Cowton Reserve is north of the subject property. Adjacent properties to the south are zoned RS2 and developed with duplexes. Mamquem Elementary is across Government Road to the east. This rezoning application seeks to rezone the parcel on the east side of the CN rail line, fronting Government Road, from RS2 to RM2 to facilitate the development of 26 townhomes. No development or changes to the existing zoning are proposed for the parcel to the west of the rail line. The applicant is proposing to dedicate this land to the district. The property is located in a conditional densification area, and the applicant has completed flood modeling to confirm that the proposed development footprint and grading plan will not have adverse impact on flood conveyance. There are 2 environmentally sensitive areas located on the portion of the property that is subject to the rezoning. As such, they trigger the requirements of Development Permit Area 1 for protection of the environment. The applicant has prepared a report establishing the setbacks from these areas that meet the DPA 1 guidelines. A development permit for the protection of environment will be processed should this rezoning application be successful. The applicant is proposing to maintain a number of the existing mature trees on site as part of this application. This application would meet the requirements of the RM2 zone. The proposed lot coverage is 38%, building height is 9.91 meters, and the gross floor area of all the buildings is 3,111 square meters for a floor area ratio of 0.55. 21 of the units will have 3 bedrooms and 5 will have 2 bedrooms plus a den. Units will range in size from 111 square meters to 140 square meters. The development is accessed off Government Road. 9 of the units provide side-by-side parking within a garage. The remaining units provide 1 stall within a garage and a second surface parking stall in front of the garage. 7 visitor parking stalls are provided for a total of 59 parking stalls, which meets the requirement of the zoning bylaw. A shared waste stream is provided as required. There's 1,403 square meters of common open space proposed, including a covered communal amenity space, a toddler play area, and an adventure play area. 1,080 square meters of private open space is provided in the form of ground level yard and patio space for each unit. This application triggers the previous CAC policy. The applicant has proposed the following offer, which meets the previous policy for a multifamily residential or mixed-use rezoning application, proposing less than 50 dwelling units. A cash in lieu for critical amenities in the amount of $502,380, which meets the policy. And for the active transportation and parks contribution, the dedication of the 1.5 hectare parcel on the west side of the CN rail line to the district. The applicant is also proposing to enter into a no gas covenant, and that all the units will be powered by electricity. To inform the community per policy, the project was posted to the district's development showcase and a development sign was installed on the property. No comments or requests for a public information meeting have been received to date. So staff recommend giving bylaw 3004 first and second reading and scheduling a public hearing for January 16th, 2024 at 6 p.m. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Council, questions? Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. Through the chair, I think I know the answer to this, but I do want to clarify. If this were to get through rezoning at subdivision or at development permit, the subdivision control bylaw would apply in terms of frontage improvements, right? So sidewalks, that sort of stuff happens at DP.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay, and that question comes from a curiosity in terms of vehicle flow onto government road into a school zone. Is that something that is considered now or later in the design?
Through the chair, engineering has done a preliminary review of the proposed rezoning and considers the proposed access sufficient. The detailed design of the frontage will be determined in the future.
Okay, my other minor question is just with regards to the parking, all the designated accessible parking units are within the visitor spots. None are designated within the actual units. And I'm just curious, 10% of the units will have to be required to be accessible based on our DP guidelines. So I'm just curious why none of the spots for parking are considered accessible within the units themselves.
Through the mayor, the requirements for the accessible stalls presently in the zoning bylaw are kind of in addition to the what would be provided in a garage. It's kind of complicated. If you're providing them as visitor parking stalls, I think that's the intention, so that folks who require those spaces who are visiting the stalls can use them, and then there should be sufficient space within a garage to accommodate this. The actual dimensions of the parking stalls within a garage or a surface parking stall are based on the width of the drive aisle accessing them. So there's a bit of nuance there, but they should be sufficient to facilitate accessible folks needing to park in the garage.
Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Go ahead, Councillor Penningal.
The piece of land proposed as park or for active trails and parks and so on, is that accessible or how would it be accessible if we were to take that on?
Through the mayor, it's not presently accessible. There's no pedestrian crossing over the CN rail line. It is actually an environmentally sensitive area, quite environmentally sensitive, and it's a mature forest. So ideally, it would probably be best suited as just to be preserved as is and maintain. It could be used for maintaining flood conveyance as well, but it's sort of probably best left alone. It's part of the reason why the district felt it would be more appropriate for the district to own it and not a strata. It is in the ALR, so you could not put any kind of covenant restricting agriculture use or restricting uses on it. But this piece of land is quite environmentally sensitive and is probably best left as is.
Okay, and so is this then is consistent with what we're after in terms of parks? And I apologize, the policy is not fresh in my head, but in terms of a park dedication or it's maybe not, but we see other useful value. And so that's why we are considering it sort of instead of what we would normally accept in terms of a park.
Through the mayor, yes, that would be correct. It has environmental assets that are considered appropriate and valuable. So that is why staff are entertaining accepting the dedication.
Councillor Hamilton?
Thanks very much. I assume I know the answer to this already, but you said the CAC offer is consistent with our previous CAC policy. Is that because the application was submitted before our change in CAC policy?
Through the mayor, that's correct.
Thank you. So I see that this parcel is being treated as two parcels, and I just want to be make sure I'm extra clear. I think I know the answer to this one too, but when we're talking about lot coverage and all the rest, that I hope is obvious. We're basing that off in relation to just that parcel, not the overall parcel, including the piece that's hooked and to be dedicated to the municipality. So are there any special considerations in that regard?
No, the project is based just on the eastern parcel, and it meets the requirements of the RM2 zoning that would be applied just to that parcel.
Okay, thank you. That was the answer I was expecting to get. So thank you for that. Council, any further questions or moving? Go ahead. Go ahead, Councillor Stoner.
Yeah, just back to the CAC proposal and the equivalency of the 1.5 hectare parcel relative to what our cash in lieu for active transportation and parks would be. Do we have a sense of what the actual value of that land is?
Through the mayor, not a specific one, but it would certainly be higher than the contribution the cash contribution that is being allocated to it.
But it is basically non-developable land because it's so highly environmentally sensitive.
Through the chair, there may be portions of it that could be developable. You'd need to hire a qualified environmental professional to go out and do all that detailed assessment work. But the applicants have provided other valuations that were higher than this contribution that we're crediting them.
Go ahead, Mr. Vilniskis.
Just want to add to Mr. Daly's statements in that it's also ALR. So it's agricultural land, which complicates the sensitivity or the environmental sensitivity impact on what you can do with the property if you're going to use it for agriculture. You know, there's certain aspects of environmental law that wouldn't apply.
Okay. Councillor Hamilton, go ahead.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? I'll second it. Would you like to speak to it?
Thanks very much. This seems like a fairly straightforward zoning change. I think it's one of the first that I've seen that we have another zone that's already defined to upzone it to. So for me, it was quite a bit simpler to go through and think through. I think the zoning appears consistent with the other area, the other properties in the area. So I'll speak in support of this rezoning application.
Thank you. Other comments? Go ahead, Councillor Stoner.
Yeah, I too will support the motion on the floor. I think that this is an interesting proposal that, as Councillor Hamilton mentioned, does meet all the requirements under the RM2. Right. And I do think that generally, as per our OCP policy, this is an area that we tend to encourage densification. It is walking distance to some critical amenities. It's on a key transit line and across the street from an elementary school. So I think that generally in line with our OCP policy, and look forward to hearing what the community has to say at an open house or at the public hearing in January. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments? Speaking in support of the motion, I think this is a nice addition to the neighborhood, and it aligns with a lot of our policies. I do have some concerns that I know will be addressed the next step, but I want to speak to them now. I've had some very challenging times at that corner more than once, and I know that driveway, as much as the driveway existed, I don't know the last time a vehicle came out of that driveway, and we are adding some residents to that area. I know that the road design will need to change to accommodate, and I'm sure that there is a safe design there. But I want to highlight the challenges there, and I know that will be addressed at future steps. Not this one. It's not something to hold up this process, but I'm really curious to see what can happen there. And I think when we reach an acceptable design there, it will increase overall safety of everyone moving through that area. That's my expectation. So, but I'm happy to support it at this point in time, and hear what the community has to say about this in January. And I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. And do we need a separate motion for scheduling the public hearing, or was the intent of the mover that did we just vote on both? Okay, so make sure everyone's on the same page. Great. Can someone get Councillor French back? I think he should just be in meeting room 1. Okay, next we have zoning bylaw number 2200-2011, amendment bylaw number 3012-2023, Falcon Crescent childcare expansion, and a discussion around priority policy update regarding childcare. Back over to staff.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Jessie Fletcher, planner with the Community Planning and Sustainability Department. With me this evening is Senior Director of Community Development, Jonas Vilniškis, and Sarah McJanet, Senior Planner, who's joining us virtually. Tonight, I'm here to present 2 minor regulatory updates to the district's policies and regulations in support of meeting the direction in the district's OCP, Child Care Action Plan, and Child Care Needs Assessment and Strategy. Staff conduct regular review of regulations in alignment with policy. This year, staff have identified several items relating to childcare and are presenting these 2 tonight for council consideration. Tonight, we will present a district-led zoning amendment for an existing commercial childcare facility in the Ravenswood subdivision and consideration of a policy amendment that would prioritize development files for standalone childcare facilities. This zoning amendment was originally identified for inclusion within the 2023 omnibus, but has been separated out. Demand for childcare in the district has continued to grow. The district has a target of a 30% access rate, which would mean that 30% of children have access to group childcare. The district currently has a 20.8% access rate, which is a decrease from the 2019 rate. To reach the 30% access rate by 2026, the district would need to add 118 new spaces a year. Project Play, the facility that is subject to the district-led rezoning this evening, has communicated that their current waitlist is 172 children long, looking for spaces within the next 3 years. So our first proposed set of changes is a minor update to the priority development application review policy that would state that standalone childcare facilities that require rezonings, DVPs, TUPs, or building permits be prioritized in terms of staff workflow based on availability within that program. These files tend to require less overall staff time as they are typically minor in nature. It should be noted here that its inclusion aligns with the district's definition of a critical amenity. This policy helps incentivize the development of projects that support council and community objectives, such as affordable housing, market rental, employment space, and energy efficiency. The second proposed change is an adjustment to the zoning of 39319 Falcon Crescent. This is a residential home that was rezoned to a commercial childcare facility in 2020 and has undergone significant renovations to meet an assembly use, meaning higher fire separation ratings, accessibility requirements, and occupant safety ratings, or requirements, I'm sorry. Staff complete several site visits annually to childcare facilities when opportunities arise to learn about what is working and what is not working as it relates to regulations. Upon visit to this facility this year, it appeared as though a large section of floor area was unused. Through further research, it became evident that a narrow interpretation of the BC Building Code had previously been applied and led to a condition of use within the zone that limited the use of the area and therefore led to a cap on the size of a childcare facility in the zoning. Given policy to reduce regulatory hurdles in the Child Care Action Plan, staff suggests removing this condition of use and allowing the number of children in a child care facility to be regulated by the BC Building Code and child care licensing regulations exclusively. This would allow up to an additional 8 children if the daycare wished to pursue this. The zoning bylaw would continue to regulate the density of the building, the floor area ratio, and the use of childcare. This slide highlights the regulatory context within which this childcare and all childcares operate. So the childcare licensing regulations, a subset of the Community Care and Assisted Living Act, is a provincial regulation that dictates the space required, so indoor and outdoor space per child, specifics around what that space looks like, requirements for number of educators, ratios of educators per child, education for those educators, and number of hours per day permitted for care, amongst many other things. This is the primary document that determines what the maximum group size of a childcare facility can be. The BC Building Code regulates fire protection, occupant safety, and accessibility. The zoning regulates the density and the use. So can a childcare facility go here and what the density of the building can be built to, typically measured in gross floor area. So the proposed regulations would remove this regulation from the Comprehensive Development 38 zone. The regulation of the group side would fall directly to the BC Building Code and the CCLR, while the zoning would continue to regulate the floor area ratio of the building. In terms of public engagement, the Child Care Project page was updated to reflect these proposed changes in October of 2023. For the rezoning, staff began by reviewing the 2020 public information meeting and public hearing feedback. Given that this is a district-led rezoning, no public information meeting was required and none was held, given how recent the previous PIM was. Staff compared concerns from the PIM and bylaw complaints in the subsequent period. Only one bylaw complaint could be traced back potentially to the operation of the childcare facility. Staff researched ways in which negative externalities, including sound and traffic, could be attributable to an increase of 8 children, but found no policy guidance or methods. Staff then sent a mail out to residents within 100 meters of the facility asking for feedback to gauge whether significant issues that could be traced back to the bylaw existed. Staff also conducted several site visits. Staff received 3 letters containing feedback regarding the change. Feedback received echoed much of the feedback received previously in terms of concerns about traffic safety and road safety. Staff also received a letter of support noting that the addition of 8 children would unlikely add much, if any, negative impacts. As noted, only one bylaw complaint could be linked back to the letter, and it was about a vehicle blocking a driveway during pickup hours. The emphasis on supporting the creation of new childcare spaces is policy-driven, starting with the official community plan. The childcare needs assessment and strategy and childcare action plan build on the policy within the OCP and support the district in seeking ways to help reduce regulation and barriers to the construction of new facilities. Staff recommend first and second reading of the bylaw amendment and scheduling of the public hearing for December 5th and the move to amend the priority development application review policy. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Council. Questions? Go ahead, Councillor Hamilton.
Hi there. Thanks very much for the report, for the proposal here. I have a question about the priority area table. We obviously have several priorities within the community, and I'd just like to understand how where this would fit in the priority table. Does it go ahead of some things or below some things?
Through you, Mayor, all of the items listed in the priority table have the same weight, essentially. So it wouldn't be, one over the other. It would be in addition to all of the priorities in there.
And now this is not for this topic here, but for my general understanding, how often is our priority queue full? For example, how often are we working on the priority, roughly, how often are we working on the priority queue and not accessing the normal queue?
Through you, Mayor, the queue is mostly full. I mean, as soon as something comes out of the queue, something else goes into it because there's things sitting in queue waiting to get in on the priority queue. It's not that we are not working on everything else. It's that these projects get priority, in placement on council agendas, referral and response from other departments. So they essentially slow down everything else, but we're still working on those other things. It slows it down.
Thank you. Councillor Stoner?
And there are a maximum number of projects that fit in the is it 5 that we have going at any one time? Is that correct?
Through the mayor, that is correct.
And in fear of opening up a whole broader discussion, we have heard feedback that the priority queue is a little bit challenging because there's actually so much demand to be in the priority queue that for some projects it's actually not been beneficial. So I'm just wondering if staff can speak to an option to review the priority policy more broadly, recognizing that there's identified policy that should direct, in my opinion, childcare within this queue. But there's perhaps a broader conversation that should happen at some point around the priority policy areas.
Through the mayor, we are planning to do that conversation next year. Some of it depends on our success with the CMHC grant funding. If we get that grant funding, one of the components of how we use that money is a housing unit. So that would obviously would have some impact on the priority applications. We'll be able to have more people working on more applications, essentially. So I think if we are successful with that grant funding, we could expand the number of projects in the priority queue.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. And then with respect to the specific Falcon Crescent childcare expansion, one of the things that we heard at the initial rezoning in 2020 and has come up in some of the feedback is the traffic piece. And I'm just curious if there's an opportunity to include 30-kilometer-an-hour signage going into the neighborhood. There is one within the internal circle, but there isn't anything as you go in to Falcon Crescent. So I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to do that at any point and if that would fall on us or on the applicant.
Through the mayor, so portions of the Falcon Crescent neighborhood or Ravenswood neighborhood are 30K, but 50K does apply elsewhere. The district is currently undergoing a review of traffic speeds throughout the district. And then my understanding through speaking with a transportation planner was that work is coming forward to council in 2024, and that would be included in that. In the interim, though, if residents did have concerns about traffic calming, they can always email the engineering department with their concerns, and we do have an inventory where we track those requests.
Thank you. Council, other questions? I'll venture one of my own. The direction to have the maximum size governed by arguably the more appropriate entities, that decision would impact other childcare spaces, I would imagine. Do we have any idea of if this would increase capacity more broadly across the community with this change? I understand that each facility has its own story to tell and nuances, but do we have any idea of sort of other impacts besides this specific one that we're instigating the conversation today?
Through the mayor, this is actually would only affect this specific property. It's unusual to have a cap to the childcare size within a zone, so it's a condition of use of this facility specifically to reflect the understanding of the building code at the time. Generally speaking, it is the childcare licensing regulations and the BC building code that on their own would regulate that and wouldn't be entrenched in the zoning.
Okay, so this really is a one-off and not in its way, not something that's systemic that we've been doing systemically.
Through the mayor, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Um, in the report, it speaks about the covenant that gives priority to the families that live within sort of the neighborhood, and I wondered if that. I know it's a covenants aren't easy to change. I just wonder if that. To me, this predates Loggers East discussions, and just given the new development occurring in the area, if there's an opportunity, whether it's now or now feels like probably the most likely time to broaden that to capture that little bit larger geographic area. I think is what the covenant intended to do, but I think the context um, is about to change there as far as the density and the developments coming in the adjacent neighborhood that's sort of talked about in that covenant. Is there an opportunity there?
Through the mayor, we could negotiate that with the owner of the daycare, although it is a district-led rezoning, so it would be unusual to add that at this point.
Yeah, I think it's broadening the reach of it though, rather than being more prescriptive. It aims to be a little bit more open. So perhaps that's not a. I'd like to hear from my council colleagues if this is something that's of any interest. But I do think that in my mind, this the initial rezone and the covenant that went with it was sort of predated a bunch of additional planning work that's happened in that area, and opening up that definition could be beneficial to how that piece of our community functions. I'll contemplate a motion to that effect, but I'd love to hear if anyone else wants to chime in on that or anything else. Councillor Penningill?
Yeah, I'm just as I recall, this was a single family home. It was a conversion to a daycare as opposed to purpose built. Do we know? I'm just trying to get some context in terms of conversions and that as opposed to. So when we're not talking about purpose built, we're talking about repurposing existing structures. Is it typical to just rely on the VCH regulations and so on for numbers and all those things, or is there typically a little more sort of municipal constraint, I guess?
Through the mayor, so for a commercial childcare facility, we exclusively rely on our density, so the gross floor area allowable for the size of the building, and then the childcare licensing regulations would determine based on the amount of indoor and outdoor space available and how that's arranged, what their maximum group size would be. So we would typically not be involved with that for a commercial facility. For residential facilities where you have group care within a home or group child care within a home, that is capped within the zoning bylaw at 16, and that's because it allows and not to go down the regulations too much, but 2 group sizes. So the maximum residential group size by the regulations in a home in a residence is 8, but we allow 2 groups, so 16. So that is a increase beyond what the regulations would allow. But typically we would rely exclusively on the provincial regulations to determine the group size.
So although this is a conversion, we are treating this one as a sort of purpose-built commercial effectively in terms of how we propose it to be regulated.
Through the mayor, it is a commercial childcare facility. So through the previous rezoning, it was rezoned from a childcare residential use to a childcare use. So it is a commercial use.
Go ahead, Councillor Stoner.
Yeah, I am just curious, following up on the mayor's questions about the covenant for geographic location. There are also existing, in addition to Loggers East, there's also the new build that's happening across the street from Seven Peaks. I can't remember what they're calling it. So I am curious, given that the proposal here is for a December 5th public hearing, I don't think that changes land use or density with the discussion around the covenant, but is that something that staff could explore and come back to third reading in the same timeline that we have in our agenda?
Through the mayor, staff can do that, yes.
Thank you. And on this same question, in that development right by Brennan Park, across from, I should know that Was it Mountain Village? Thank you. Centennial Way and Loggers Lane area. I know that there's childcare as part of that. Was there a similar covenant with that one?
I don't believe so, but to give a confirmed answer, we'd have to check, but I don't think so.
Okay, thank you. Okay, my brain's still working on this. Other questions on this? Nope. Okay, we do have some staff recommendations before us. Go ahead, Councillor Stoner. Are you moving all together?
I'll move the staff recommendations with the addition that staff pursue the potential to expand the geographic area of the covenant or the catchment area of childcare. Is that clear enough?
I think we understand what you're saying. I don't know.
You can try again, but
No, I think that's okay, and I'll second it. And would like to speak to it,
Yeah.
Councillor Stoner?
I will speak to this. Thanks to staff for their work on this, and both the priority area, the priority development application review policy amendment. I think that this makes good sense relative to the existing policies that we have in place and the direction and the need in our community with respect to creating more childcare spaces. I think that this makes good sense. And with respect to the zoning amendment, I do think that it is important. I feel like maybe we've overstepped here a little bit in terms of trying to regulate group size within the zone. Zoning really is about land use and density and not the group size of a childcare facility. I think we need to leave that up to the province. So appreciate, I think, some of the rationale as to why it was in there in the first place, but I think it's an important step forward. And if folks feel differently, we'll hear about that on December 5th. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, I'm going to support this, and overall, I think it makes sense. A couple things I do have some hesitation about a little bit, and so it'll be interesting to hear the public dialogue. I think from an equity perspective, broadening the sort of who has priority access makes sense. But, my recollection is that this was put in to sort of offset some perceived impacts on the community for the benefit of the community. And so, I do, I guess, wonder to what degree the community should be part of that conversation. And maybe that's the public hearing when we hear that piece. As a general principle, it's not completely offside to me that the municipality would add some regulation above what the province puts on. But as we look to build sort of a walkable, livable community where services are close and so on, we may have some restrictions that are working against us. And so that's why, I think there's some nuance and some things to think about there, but overall what's proposed makes sense going forward with, I think.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. I'll support the motion and just pass on that I will hope to learn more about potential initiatives that could be considered to alleviate or mitigate the concerns raised by two of our correspondents. I find that the concerns and observations that they presented in two letters to be credible. And some of these concerns do affect the entire neighborhood because the traffic patterns are involving the concerns are involving the entire neighborhood to some extent. So we'll be interested to learn more about potential mitigation or considerations regarding these concerns, and hopefully we'll hear from the neighborhood at the public hearing event. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm speaking in support of the motion. I think having the province regulate the size and functionality of childcare spaces and the nuance associated with that makes a ton of sense. I agree with the priority piece of this, I think that as outlined in our, we know we have needs in the community around childcare, and and we've attempted to respond to that with policies like our CAC policy that has been ensuring that we get creation of childcare spaces. So this prioritization to me aligns with a lot of that work, and I'm happy to see that. My goal with speaking about expanding the catchment area is really taking into consideration some of the concerns that we've heard from the neighborhood around vehicle movements. Having the highest percentage possible of the spaces there occupied by families that can walk there makes just a ton of sense, and is another way to and I think the appropriate way to address concerns around traffic. So our planning processes have added density in that area, and with more sitting in sort of in the plan, and that's my interest there, is to ensure that, and I believe that was the intent of the covenant at that time. And it's just changed. The context has changed just a little bit, and I think it'd be a good discussion to have. But it's certainly not to limit their business. It's to ensure that we have the maximum amount of people that can walk, cycle, stroll, whatever, to their childcare in their neighborhood. So I look forward to seeing the outcome of those discussions, and seeing what the community has to say about this coming up in December. Seeing no other hands, I'll call a question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. So now we're on to first three readings. District of Squamish Building Bylaw number 1822, 2024 amendment. This is the step code 3 option, and is bylaw number 3020, 2023. I'll turn it over to staff to introduce themselves on the topic. Take it away when you're ready.
Thank you. Thank you, Council. My name is Colin McCarthy. I'm the manager of building services at the District of Squamish. I'm going to apologize in advance. I've been a little hoarse for the last few days. I'll do what I can to be understood. I'm here to present to you step code option for development related to restrictive and options on meeting the step code for development. Back up a little bit. Sorry about that. A brief history of the Energy Step Code. In 2018, the District of Squamish adopted the BC Energy Step Code. The Energy Step Code is intended to be an optional and incremental approach to regulate the energy efficiency of buildings by setting target dates of implementation of the 5 steps. For the intent of this presentation, we'll be discussing Part 3 buildings of wood frame construction. This represents the majority of new dwelling units constructed in Squamish recently. You have to forgive me, I'm having difficulty with this presentation.
We're happy to take a quick timeout if you want to, if it needs to be reloaded or rebooted or unplugged and plugged back in or whatever.
You know what?
helps your
I would
situation.
appreciate 5 minutes to do that.
Okay, yeah, let's do that.
It
Let's
wasn't
take
looking
a,
like this when I put it on the zip drive a minute ago.
yeah, no, that's fine. So council, we'll come back at what, 7:02. We'll give you 5 minutes to get started. Thank you. Okay, we are back, and I will turn it back over to staff to discuss Energy Step Code 3 with zero carbon. Over to you.
Thank you very much. You don't know how much you rely on your notes until they disappear. Yes, to discuss a step code option for building at the District of Squamish. Thank you very much. I wanted to begin this time with a brief description of the type of buildings we're talking about. The BC Building Code, Part 3 and Part 9 buildings. Part 3 of the BC Building Code applies to the construction of any new building, a change of occupancy class of any existing building, as well as any alteration or addition or demolition of any building. While Part 9 of the BC Building Code applies to buildings that are 3 stories or less in building height and have a building area of less than 600 square meters that are used for major occupancy classes of residential, business, mercantile, medium, and low hazard industrial. And while it sounds like it contradicts itself, I prefer to think of it that in short, BCBC Part 3 applies to all buildings, but we look for exemptions in Part 9, so that Part 9 allows relaxations and exemptions in smaller buildings associated with lower risk activities. It's a simple way of describing how they are classed. A brief history of the Energy Step Code. In 2018, Squamish adopted the BCBC Energy Step Code. Energy Step Code is intended to be an optional and incremental approach to increasing energy efficiency. As of January 2021, the Squamish Building Bylaw requires that all Part 3 residential buildings must meet Step 4 of the BCBC Energy Step Code. This has had a significant impact on the cost of construction. The difference in energy efficiency. Over time, as high-performance designs, materials, and systems become increasingly available and cost-effective, the building industry will integrate new techniques into all new buildings. By 2032, the BC Building Code will move toward the higher steps of the BC Energy Step Code as a minimum requirement and prescriptive requirement. The National Building Code of Canada is similarly moving towards this outcome by 2030. The District of Squamish has set high targets and now has some of the highest and most restrictive energy requirements in British Columbia. Our neighbors with similar buildings, just some interesting points. In Whistler, in January of 2024, they will adopt a requirement for Step 3 with strong carbon performance for these similar buildings. The City of North Vancouver currently requires Part 3 residential occupancies to meet Step 3. There's an update to the Step Code requirements expected this month, but I don't have an update on that. West Vancouver, as of November 2023, this month, will require Step 2 of the Energy Step Code with emission level 3 under the new Carbon Step Code, or a Step 4. So they could meet the current step that we require here in Squamish, or go to a Step 2 with an emission level 3. Burnaby requires Step 2 of the Energy Step Code since May 1st of 2023, and as I understand, they do currently. Surrey requires Step 3 or Step 2 if meeting the City of Surrey low carbon energy requirements since April of 2019, and we're expecting an update in Surrey. And Langford has adopted Step 2 for Part 3 buildings in May 2023. So this just is an example of how here in Squamish currently we have the most restrictive energy conservation requirements. The difficulties with Step 4, and these were I came upon these with a meeting with one of the larger local developers who have done quite a lot of research in this and looking at how they can build effectively in this economy with these requirements. Builders have recently started receiving completed surveys of projected costs for buildings that will be required to meet Step 4. And those numbers are approximately up to 25% higher than buildings constructed under Step 3. It is presumed by our industry contacts that it will be extremely difficult for builders to meet the air tightness requirements required by Step 4. Builders cannot use their typical suppliers to purchase standard products. Newer and alternative products related to meeting the required energy efficiency must be sourced, and availability varies. Contractors, we're told, are quoting very high to cover complications with installing non-typical product using non-typical process. This means that it's hard to find people who are familiar with these processes, and thereby more time and more expense. Roofing systems require approximately 2% of additional cladding to cover larger attic areas required for additional insulation. Windows, which fiberglass and triple glaze are what are required to meet these step 4 requirements, are approximately 5% higher. Cladding systems are approximately 7% higher. And the mechanical systems with variable refrigerant flow has added up to 11% to the cost of mechanical systems. What can we do? The building department is proposing a bylaw amendment that would provide an option for builders to meet step 4 of the BC Energy Step Code, as is the current requirement, or meet step 3 of the BC Energy Step Code and meet emission level 4 of the Zero Carbon Step Code. In May of 2023, the BC Building Code was revised once again. This revision is to allow for municipalities to implement a zero carbon step code. This regulation, if adopted into the District of Squamish building bylaw, would again set dates and specific targets that must be met in the design and construction of specific building types. This would regulate the emission levels of carbon. There are 4 levels that range from a requirement at level 1 to measure and record greenhouse gas emission levels. This was similar to the Energy Step Code. At level 1, there was only a requirement to record. And this demonstrates the stepping up. And so it goes from simply needing to record to a level 4 that requires a maximum GHGI, as you can see what those maximum levels are in the table. The building department would again be relying on reports from certified consultants to determine compliance. These are especially in the large buildings, these are complicated formulas. We do have ways of verifying this. We look for red flags, but we essentially rely on these consultants to provide these calculations. More on the Zero Carbon Step Code. The Zero Carbon Step Code is new within the BC Building Code. And our intent is to look at the implementation of the Zero Carbon Step Code in the District of Squamish in 2024. What it would take to do this is that we need to collaborate between the building and sustainability departments, consult and find out what might be the appropriate step to begin with, consult with stakeholders, design an incremental approach, and bring forward another bylaw amendment to council. Therefore, this is an interim step, what we're considering with the combination of the step code and the Energy Step Code and the Zero Carbon Step Code. And that is the end of our presentation on this, and I'm happy to field any questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Council, questions? Councillor Pettingill.
So we've typically, I would argue, in the last while, been pushing for no gas covenants on Part 3 buildings, including, for the most part, the commercial portions, which, and maybe I've been thinking about it incorrectly, but I've been equating that to EL4, and maybe the no gas covenant is stronger, arguably, but I guess, is the proposal that we would keep pushing for the no gas covenants on a sort of one-off basis and tackle the EL4 piece later? Or are you suggesting, is the suggestion that we back off no gas covenants and not do EL4 at this point?
Through the mayor, because this is an interim measure, we're not suggesting any change to the process we're using now with no gas covenants. It's essentially just to provide a pressure relief valve to high construction costs in the industry. until we get to the longer term solution, which hopefully will eliminate the need for no gas covenants. Everyone's going to be, building to the same standard when it comes to energy source or energy efficiency, whether you're rezoning or going straight to a building permit. So no changes proposed at the moment.
So, but effectively, like if we're pushing for a no gas covenant, doesn't that effectively give someone EL4? So if we're doing that anyways, I guess I'm trying to say, with this change, might we just take that opportunity, take the no gas covenant discussion off the table, but it's EL4, you can have your step 3 sort of, and then we'll keep the step 3 until it's time to put it back up to step 4? Or is there, I guess that's why I'm trying to wrap my head around why it seems the suggestion is to still push for no gas covenants and then the EL3, EL4 thing, or the EL4 on commercial is sort of a non-issue because we've got the no gas covenant.
Because it is, if we apply this more broadly, for instance, no gas covenants apply to all kinds of buildings, not just Part 3. There could be Part 9 buildings, sometimes smaller townhomes developments, or developments that include duplexes. We'll have Part 9 buildings. So this wouldn't apply to those structures. We'll still use the no gas covenants. This is really to address the urgency of construction cost that is creating in the industry to move forward with all kinds of projects. But the biggest issue we're hearing about is in those bigger buildings where costs are magnified, and the technology to meet step 4 is not readily or widely available, and the labor to implement them. So like I said, we will still continue to use the no gas covenants until we get to next year and we do this larger, wider update to the building bylaw.
Thank you for that. And on that point, the no gas covenant, the opportunity to secure one of those is at rezoning versus pre-zoned. When people move something forward that doesn't require a rezone, then this would come into play there. And there's not an opportunity to have that layer of no gas covenant. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, did I see any other hands on this? Yeah, go ahead, Councilor French.
Thanks, Mayor. I saw that the UDI claims, or the Urban Development Institute claims that BC Hydro has local distribution capacity constraints in Squamish. So I'm wondering, do District of Squamish staff share that UDI concern?
Not exactly. I think it's a twofold issue. One is some projects that go fully electric have to build their own substation essentially into the building, and that takes up valuable floor space. And something like a substation probably has to be elevated out of the flood construction level as well. So there's additional costs for building large buildings that fully depend on electricity, because of the vehicle charging that has to happen in the buildings and everything else.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Okay, Council, we have, go ahead, Councilor Pettingill.
So if I understand, and from some of the prior claims that the step code has the larger impact on cost right now, as opposed to the emissions level like EL3, EL4 in general. Is that accurate?
What we have heard so far from the industry is the energy efficiency, the energy step code are what are causing the holdup or the stall in starts presently, and that's due to costs. I haven't heard anything similar related to the zero carbon step code and changing the energy source from electric to gas. This isn't, I haven't heard of this. I have spoken about this proposal with a couple of the larger developers and have not heard any feedback regarding similar problems.
I've got Councilor Stoner.
Thank you. Through the chair, also just to clarify, step 4 currently only applies to Part 3 residential buildings wood frame. and Part 9 residential buildings, which are smaller, over 1,000 square foot in gross floor area. That's correct, right? It doesn't apply to the Part 3 commercial buildings. That's still at step 3.
I believe that is correct. I'm in the habit of when someone asks me a bylaw question, I make sure it's open in front of me, but I believe that's correct. And my partner's whispering in my ear. It is.
Yes, I have the bylaw open.
Okay, we all have the understanding of that. That's
And
good
sorry,
teamwork.
just
Go
to
ahead.
follow up on that, we're not hearing the same concerns about the Part 9 residential buildings achieving step 4. So this bylaw amendment is really only focused on those larger Part 3 residential wood frame buildings, correct?
Yes, we have not heard a larger concern, nor have we seen as big a slowdown and hearing the complaints from the industry regarding the Part 9 hasn't been the same at all. We always hear about concerns about how expensive things are getting, but it hasn't been the same in any way.
Okay, council, we've got, oh, yep, go ahead, Councilor Pettingill.
I was going to try a motion if.
Feels like time for that. Take it away.
Okay, so I was going to try to move the staff recommendation with an addition at the end of 17.4B. So it finishes specified in EL4 of the zero carbon step code, provided where business, personal service, and or mercantile occupancies are proposed, the entire building meets minimum performance requirements of EL4. And I'll speak to that if seconded.
Are you seconding that, Councilor Greenlaw? No, go ahead. Okay, Councilor Pettingill.
Yeah, thanks. And I would like to credit staff with the wording here. Didn't feel comfortable trying to do this on my own. My thinking here, I had been considering just holding off on one-off no gas covenants, but what tweaked it for me was when the mayor mentioned that that's only when we get rezonings that we have that opportunity. And just hearing the most recent data, like we're on target for 3 degrees and like it's pretty dire out there. And so having buildings, even if it's for a few months, buildings that are going to last 60 years with gas infrastructure, it just doesn't make sense to me. I can understand stepping back on the building efficiency, which it sounds like that's where the complaints are, where the real cost is. So if we need to step back to step 3 and recognizing that CMHC and BC Housing are still going to build to step 4 even with this change. So this is really for the private for-profit developers, but taking that step back on that cost and that impact, I'm fine as long as we can deal with that emissions piece, which is the real critical emergency piece. And so I feel in my mind like this is a reasonable middle ground to deal with these two things. And I think this is a good step for the industry. Would just also like to add that, we understood, I think, or at least I did, that there would be some cost in going first, but it establishes the market. The market doesn't change. The contractors aren't trained and so on until people start requiring this. And so we are driving the market, and there's some impacts to that. It also means that our contractors and suppliers that are operating here are going to be ahead and have an advantage, I think, over everyone else when they start to come along, because they're all going to have to come along. And so, I can live with stepping back to step 3, but I think for me, I'd like to be a bit of a trade-off and go to EL4 across the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any other comments on this? I'll speak in favor of the motion. I think this as I started dealing with the step code, really to me the motivator is the not just the efficiencies of the building, but the reason we want to have efficiencies of building is to push on the emissions front. So I think this and I think this is a totally prudent step at this point, and sometimes have to take a half step back to go 3 steps forward. And I think that's where we are. That's what the market's telling us. And I appreciate the extra language around provided by Councillor Pettingill. I think that meets objectives that we've been working towards using other mechanisms like no gas covenants in rezoning. So I'm happy to support at this point. Any other comments? Councillor Stoner?
Sorry, I'm just wondering if the mover can clarify what the additional language intends to do.
So the intent is that if you are a Part 3 building and you'd like to build a Step 3 instead of Step 4, then any residential or commercial parts of that building need to comply with the EL4 emissions. So effectively, that means low emissions energy source in the whole, residential or commercial. The step code 3 piece, you still get that reduction in the residential. The commercial already has a lower step code. So it's basically, instead of saying, okay, if you want step 3 for residential, it's no gas for residential. It's you want step 3 for residential, it's no gas for the residential and commercial, which is similar to what we've been doing with no gas covenants. And I'm oversimplifying a little bit, but.
Okay. I appreciate the clarification. Thank you. I will be supporting the motion on the floor. I do think that this continues to meet the intent of what we tried to do in terms of being leaders with adoption of the step code. I do hear Councillor Pettingill, and that we knew that there would be some pain points if we were going to lead in this direction. But I think that given the economic context within which we're working and knowing the affordability and the housing crisis that we're living through as well, that I think the impact that we're having is perhaps disproportionate to what we intended it to be. And this is a really elegant solution in the interim to still achieve our climate goals as well as our housing affordability goals, and trying to get more, especially market rental units built. So I will support the motion on the floor. Thank you.
Councillor Anderson.
Oh, thank you. I will be supporting the resolution as well. Two general comments. We should keep in mind that we are here still only talking about operational energy sources and operational efficiency, and that's not a complete picture of green building. Our construction facilities manager, in regular reports to open meetings of council over the last couple of years, has focused on another element, and that is embodied carbon. We've given that priority in our municipal buildings, and it's an evolving world, and it will catch up to all of us as we deal with an evolving building code and these step codes. The other comment I might make has already been raised by Councillor French, and that is BC hydro capacity constraints. And just quoting from the UDI Urban Institute letter, phased implementation of the zero carbon step code is recommended due to accounting for BC hydro capacity constraints. I think this is something we need to watch ongoing, and for us as councillors, we need to build our own picture of this. The last district energy plan in 2007 gave very close focus to this general provincial topic of electricity and where it comes from and how much is available. When I travel the highway, I see an awful lot of poles heading to Squamish. I also see a big business in selling poles from Squamish, and I would like to suggest that when we next discuss our community climate action plan, an update and or review, that we give focus to this and be comfortable with where we're at in Squamish with respect to electrification of buildings and other options, as we did 15 years ago. I think that would be a healthy discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on this? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. And thank you. Okay, next we're on to District of Squamish Development Cost Charge Bylaw number 2911, 2022. And this is amendment bylaw 3021 for 2023, and is the 2023 housekeeping amendments. I will pass it over to staff.
Thank you, Mayor Herford. Good evening again, Mayor and Council. My name is Brian Daly, planner with Community Planning. I'll now be presenting the 2023 housekeeping amendments to the DCC bylaw for consideration of first 3 readings. At the September 6, 2022 regular council meeting, council adopted DCC bylaw number 2911-2022, which aligned the DCC bylaw with provincial best practices and updated DCC rates in the bylaw. Bylaw 2911 inadvertently removed the DCC exemption for not-for-profit rental housing and for-profit affordable rental housing that was included in the previous DCC bylaw 2762-2020. Section 563 of the Local Government Act outlines regulations for development which DCCs may be waived or reduced. There are 4 categories that are considered an eligible development. Those include not-for-profit rental housing, including supportive living housing, for-profit affordable rental housing, subdivision of small lots that is designed to result in low greenhouse gas emissions, and finally, a development that is designed to result in a low environmental impact. Local governments must, by bylaw, establish what constitutes an eligible development and the amount or rates of reduction for an eligible development. So bylaw 3021 proposes to add the following definitions on this slide for not-for-profit rental housing and for-profit affordable rental housing, and exempt both forms of development from DCCs. The for-profit affordable housing definition mirrors the definition of affordable housing in the zoning bylaw. While DCC bylaw 2762-2020, which was the older DCC bylaw, included the exemption for these types of development from DCCs, it did not include definitions for these types of development. Staff believe that the definitions are appropriate and would cover projects delivered by the Squamish Community Housing Society that may include units that may not meet the district's perpetual affordable housing policy. Exempting DCCs for affordable rental and not-for-profit rental housing projects is vital in ensuring the viability of these projects. So staff recommend that bylaw 3021 be given first 3 readings. You'll note that the referral to the Inspector of Municipalities for approval is not included. Since staff drafted the report, staff confirmed with the province that this type of amendment does not require inspector approval. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Council, do we have any questions? We have a staff recommendation if that's what's needed. Go ahead, Councillor Pettingill.
Do we have a reasonably easy way of tracking on an ongoing basis the amount of DCCs we're foregoing permissive tax exemption, sort of to understand how much municipal funds we're putting on an ongoing basis into below market types of housing, just more as an advocacy tool to the province? Is that something we can do simply, or is that kind of a big task, or do we know?
Through the mayor, that would be pretty easy to do. There's not a ton of projects, and they typically get calculated at building permit anyway, so we could just see what is not being provided.
Okay. Moved by Councillor Stoner. I'll second that. Do you want to speak to it, Councillor Stoner?
Yeah, just briefly, I think that this is our normative practice. It's unfortunate that it was missed in the last update, and I think this is just an administrative process to bring our procedures or our DCC bylaw back into alignment with our expectation for offsetting these costs for affordable housing.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Pettingill?
Yeah, echo my colleagues' comments and then just maybe articulate more explicitly. I hope that we will start to just keep track of this. Assuming it starts to add up, I think it would be useful in our lobbying with the province and to show them how we are putting our own resources in the game, and we would like to see continued support, I shall say, from the province as we tackle housing affordability together.
Thank you. Any other comments? Speaking in favor of the motion, I think I'm happy to see this come forward and to be corrected. I do like the suggestion of tracking the ways that we're, that we have skin in the game in the affordable housing space, and this is one of them. But I think rightly so. But it's good to quantify these things, and then that information could come in handy as we try to make other points along the way. And with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you so much. All right, we're on to item 10A1. Under staff reports, community planning and sustainability, funding application to the labor market program. I'll turn it over to Ms. Vengi.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Julie Vengi, and I am the General Manager of Community Planning and Sustainability. As per the report to Council, I'm here to seek authorization from Council to apply for Labour Market Partnership LMP program funding through the Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction in 2023 to complete a Squamish labour force plan in 2024. The budget for completion of a Squamish labour force plan is included in the 2023 to 2027 financial plan. The project is budgeted for $110,000 to be fully funded through the LMP program. If approved, staff will submit the LMP program application in the fourth quarter of 2023, and if successful in the application, the aim is that project implementation will begin in 2024. As such, staff's recommendation is that Council approve the District of Squamish's funding application to the Labour Market Partnership LMP program for the development of a labour force development plan.
Okay, thank you. Council, do you have any questions? We have and we also have a recommendation. So depending how fast we want to move here, do you have any questions stemming from the report? Councillor Anderson, is that your hand? Yep, go ahead.
My question arises from a little bit of, I perceive, I would like to be more comfortable with the areas of focus in our basic economic strategy. And in the staff report, I find there's a little bit of wandering towards a focus on emerging sectors, and I'm concerned about a neglect of the core and enabling sectors. Although this is not clear, the staff report also identifies those, but the balance or the emphasis is, I would wish it to be more clear. And the reason I suggest this, and my question is, to what extent, because we're talking here reference to jobs, openings, and demands for clean growth and climate action expertise, what about our local trucking and transportation industry, which is sorely lacking in Class 1 drivers? We are bringing low-bed equipment moving contractors up from the Fraser Valley because we have no local warm bodies with Class 1 driver's licenses. We've also already this evening addressed our construction industry, our residential housing construction industry, and there was reference made by through our staff to a lack of skilled labor in the construction sector, in particular with new types of construction, new demands on the on building standards that require new skills. And so my question, and I've couched it in the context of a little bit of confusion about where our emphasis is and where it may be limited to, is whether the labor market program initiative will address those sectors which are part of our core and enabling, that is transportation, and other sectors that rely on, these are industry jobs rather than clean growth, if you like, and that's a very loose term. I guess that's my basic lack of comfort. What do we mean by green economy and clean growth? Does it exclude people like heavy-duty mechanics and Class 1 drivers? I would hope not, because in the end, housing affordability will be affected by the fact that we have to bring contractors up from Langley or Surrey to conduct site preparation for our housing projects, because we lack Class 1 drivers and equipment operators. So I guess I've made a little bit of a speech or a rant here, Ms. Wengi, but my concern is, or my question is, whether the scope of this labor market program initiative will address skills that are not in, that are in the traditional parts or traditional sectors of our local economy. Thank you.
Through the mayor, Perhaps I can speak to this in two parts. One, the emerging sector roadmap and the other roadmaps that are listed in the document refer to documents that are already in place and strategies that are already in place. In addition to those being the areas, we also, as part of the labour force plan, also look at the regional, provincial and federal forecasts in terms of job openings, demands and that. So my understanding is that we would be guided by what the needs are and be responding to those appropriately.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Was that your hand, Councillor Stoner? I think unless there's any other questions, Councillor Stoner moves, Councillor Hamilton seconds. Discussion, go ahead.
Yeah, just briefly, a few comments. I wanted to thank staff for bringing this forward. I think it is very much in line with some of the elements that we know we need in our economic development plan. Councillor Anderson, to your point, the description of the project says that the purpose of completing the labor market plan is to address future labor force supply and demand for core, enabling and emerging sectors of the local economy. So core is in there. It's not just the emerging sector components. And then my one request would be, if we are successful in getting this grant, would be to refer this to Housing Squamish in terms of the housing needs for the workforce. I know it's something that they are interested in trying to figure out how they can get a better grip or understanding of what the workforce housing needs are. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Just speaking in support of the motion, I think workforce is a key part of realizing our economic development goals. This is a totally logical next step, and I really appreciate the potential for a project to be 100% grant funded is also a strong selling feature of many initiatives. So thank you for bringing this forward. I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, Council, now we're on to item 12.1, correspondence action requested. We have the letter from Ms. Fairweather, re the Spot Laundromat, and their new not-for-profit. Thank you. So this is for our consideration. They had some specific asks for us. Councillor Stoner?
Yeah, there's a few asks in the letter, but I would just like to move that the mayor write a letter of support for the Laundry Spot Society and the proposed programming to provide free laundry and shower facilities to those in need. I think that's the one that's the most clearly actionable at this table, and I'll speak to it if it's seconded.
Seconded by Councillor French. Yep.
It's great to see that these folks have found a new location. They are providing an amazing service to our community. We don't typically provide letters of support for specific businesses, but in their efforts to try and create a nonprofit society and provide free laundry and shower facilities to those in need, I think is a valuable service in addition to just the general laundry service that they provide in our community. And I think the other requests in this letter can be dealt with as a one-off by individual council members if they so choose, but this is something that we can action as a group around this table. Thank you.
Councillor French.
Thanks, Mayor. And in speaking in support, I think this is a great example of community coming together and getting something significant accomplished. This business clearly is not going to continue operating in the location that it's currently at. And we were inundated with email messages asking us to take a role in making sure that there's laundry service ongoing downtown. We're very limited with what we could do, but these folks lobbied hard and were persistent and have created their own success. So I take my hat off to the efforts of those that have gotten this issue to this place.
Okay, any other comments on this? Speaking in support of the motion, my initial in the first part of the letter, however, it says we're setting up a nonprofit, so we don't necessarily have a nonprofit to at this point in time to write letters of support for, but I'm sure that I can figure out an appropriate way to do that. And I applaud the creative problem solving involved in getting to this point. And I really think that this approach is and the nonprofit format is really the way forward for the service. And I do think that the spot laundry really found themselves doing a bunch of nonprofit work. So I think this better reflects where they actually found themselves while they were operating in their original location. So happy to provide the letter, and I agree with the assessment where these other pieces are things that we can help with individually, and as this project moves forward, perhaps there's other ways we can engage as a body to support them in their endeavors. But it's great to have essentially a new nonprofit operating in this space for underserved members of our community. No other comments. I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much. Okay, next Councilor Penigo.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this requires a motion, but I would like to flag this possibly for inclusion in our strategic planning thinking and discussions. For me, there's some overlap possibly with vehicle residency and just sort of where we are going in terms of some of these needs and where that fits into all the things we are doing. And so I think it's useful context for those discussions.
Yeah, thank you for that. When I think about building relationships with community groups to increase community capacity and resiliency, which is one of the pieces under resilient people and relationships, I think clearly calls out nonprofits. And I think just due to that fact, it'll organically be part of us understanding the landscape and thus the actions there. So I don't think it requires a specific motion. And it does take this entity and put them into that space, which is a positive change. So I think, but thank you for highlighting that. It is definitely a shift. But as we haven't called out any of the other ones, I don't think that it's needed at this point. So we'll go to correspondence referred from the consent agenda. So we had the energy report. I believe, was it Councillor Hamilton? I'd just like to remind you that we don't have staff here to speak to it, so we can comment on it. But if we're looking for staff answers, it'll be a refer to future meeting. But go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. It's not an extraordinarily important issue. Question. It seemed to me like that energy study was included here based on a question I asked about the amount of energy that was being used in Brennan Park. And I believe this energy study was actually included in our original package. This is a repetition of what was there, and it doesn't answer the question. So I'm not sure if it was a. Do we know why this energy study is here? And maybe I'm just concerned that it was an answer to a question that.
Okay, I have Ms. Glenday, and then we'll go to Councillor Penigo.
From what I understood, it was actually placed there as a result of a question from Councillor Pettengill in regards to the same project, though, Brennan Park, and was further referred to. So we wanted it to be highlighted for the public because it had been discussed publicly. If there's a question you had asked that hadn't been answered, if you could clarify, and we can get that for you.
How about I look back at the minutes and it's understanding the actual, the quantity of energy as opposed to just the percentage energy savings, which that study does a great job of reporting on, but doesn't give me context for the amount. Thanks. I'll look back and email.
Okay. Look forward to digging into that. And so for this item, if there's no questions or comments on it, I'll move receipt. If there's a seconder. Second by Councillor Hamilton. Thank you. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. We have no approval of minutes referred from the consent agenda. Any business arising? Seeing none. No committee minutes or reports. Council notice of motion. Seeing none, moving forward, we have no council or staff in camera announcements. We had no unscheduled public attendance. Open question period. Is there anyone online when I check? I just want to make sure I'm checking in the right spot. Okay, seeing none. Council or staff announcements. Councilor French.
Thank you. I'll start us off with one item in the hopes that some of the other folks are going to talk about firefighters and other. I wanted to point out, with thanks to Miss Arthurs for the prompt, the annual Be Bright at Night awareness campaign is back. And in light of how dark and rainy it is tonight, I think this is a great time to remind folks that these reflectors are available in various places around town. In various places, but I think the easiest and most obvious might be Brennan Park. They have them there. They are free, and they just simply clip onto your clothing or your gear, your backpack, and ICBC encourages you to wear it on the side facing traffic so that the headlights of vehicles catch the reflective part of these little cool feathers. So stay safe, folks.
Thank you for that. Councillor Stoner.
Yeah, I just want to recognize and say thanks to the folks and volunteers at Pearl Space last Wednesday. They held a lunchtime Diwali celebration. So speaking of celebrating light over dark and good over evil, there were a group of folks that came together to break bread, share a meal, light some candles, and celebrate together. And it was a really beautiful celebration with a bunch of folks from diverse communities. And just so grateful for the opportunity and the space that Pearl Space provides for diverse folks in our community and for that particular celebration. Thanks.
Thank you. Council, any other updates? Okay, I'll start with last Tuesday, the 14th, this council held our budget information night, and I just really like to thank the community that came out and participated in the process, and to staff, all the staff that were involved in preparing for and physically being at the event, as well as my council colleagues. I thought it was a great discussion with our community, and of course, we all know the budget's a huge piece of our work. On the 18th, Squamish Fire Rescue had a dinner to recognize the achievements of their members, and it was great to be invited in to be part of the fire family, as they say, for an evening, and new recruits were recognized for their achievements, as well as many long service awards handed out. And it was great to see sort of the pinnacle of the evening was the ceremonial handoff between retired Chief Stoner and our new fire chief, Foote. And it was a great opportunity to get together and to show appreciation for our fire services, and the members of our fire service and their families make tremendous sacrifices for our community, and is one of the reasons we can all sleep soundly at night, is to know that we have a great fire service, and that are exceedingly professional and proficient at what they do. And then last night, there was a transgender day of remembrance vigil in the park downtown here, and was able to attend. Myself and my wife, Councillor Pettingill, was there as well, with some members of our community. It was actually a well attended gathering, and community members shared stories of their friends and their experiences, and why sadly, we were at a candlelit vigil for Transgender Remembrance Day. And in particular, I learned about a lovely human named Peter that one of the attendees was speaking about at length. And when asked, well, that Peter sounds amazing. What kind of things did Peter like to do? I think I had the most comical response ever to a question of that. It's like, he liked to chase geese. Apparently, picnics in the park were actually the preference, but felt the geese weren't necessary and spent some time chasing the geese. So we've lost some lovely humans and that are obviously a lot of characters as well. So it's a very touching experience, and I was happy to be able to participate. And that's the end of my update at this point. Does anyone else have anything? Oh, I see. No. Okay. So yeah, go ahead, Councilor French.
I wonder if either one of you two might chat for a real brief on the wastewater treatment announcement that had an MP and an MLA. I was there very briefly, but not long enough to be able to speak intelligently like either one of you.
Yeah, that was an important part of Wednesday, wasn't it? So there was an event on Wednesday that where yes, funding from the federal government flowing through the province was provided to us to the ongoing work at the wastewater treatment plant, as well as a project on the Sunshine Coast. The exact we'll report out more fulsomely on the exact dollars and so on. But it was great to have to show that all three levels of government working together to expand our capacity and really to invest in our infrastructure. So it was a small event, but a big announcement for our community.
I just want to add, because she traveled a long way to be here, a member of the Legislative Assembly for Courtney Comox, Rona Ray Leonard, spoke at the event on behalf of Ann Kang, the BC Minister of Municipal Affairs, and MP Patrick Weiler also on hand.
Yes, thank you for that. Okay. That concludes the council staff announcements, unless anyone has anything additional. We don't have any motion to close, so I'm looking for a motion to terminate. Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor Stoner. All in favor?